I want to jump right in and invite to the stage Cathy Betts, one of Hawaii's most thoughtful agency leaders and one of the driving forces on operations and policy at the Department of Human Services. Let's welcome Deputy Director Cathy Betts to the stage. There we go. Awesome. Thank you, Cathy.
Thank you.
All right. Like I said, I know folks are still coming in, but I'm going to set this over here. Hopefully that phone doesn't go off. Yeah, hopefully that's on, right?
I gotta turn it on.
There we go. Good.
I feel like Oprah up here. I promise not to jump on the white couch and profess my love for Katie Holmes today.
Yeah. Thank you for that. But if you want to give everybody cars, that's cool too. If you want to be more like
Look
Oprah.
under your seat.
That's right, less like Tom Cruise. Why don't you just start us off? What's on the work plan for DHS here in 2019? Tell us what you have on your plate.
Sure. Well, we have a pretty packed agenda at the Department of Human Services. So I started as the Deputy Director last October 2018. So I just made a little bit over a year. And we've been juggling a lot of different priorities. So we've been looking at a lot of strategic, innovative, and creative ways to be intentional in our work for Hawaii's residents, recognizing that many of our clients are the most vulnerable and marginalized in our state. We're talking about children and families, single parents, people living in poverty, people who are generally have a harder time accessing our services, especially when they are delivered in archaic government silos. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is employ Ohana Nui, which is a multi-generational approach that strives to offer services to our most vulnerable residents, including all of the generations in a family. We have one of the highest rates of multi-generational households in the nation. We have one of the highest costs of living in the nation, cost of housing. So what we see is when we're offering these services in silos, when we're not offering the whole family, the whole gamut of different services, not just human services, but Department of Health, Department of Education, we see these families fall through the cracks. We see people who are more marginalized from the system than when they began trying to access services. So one of the things we're trying to do is really embed that multi-gen approach in all of the services that we offer. Say, for example, you have a single mom who comes in to assess her eligibility for SNAP, food stamps, and she also needs childcare. She might need civil legal services that she doesn't even understand as are civil legal services. For example, maybe she needs help accessing court services to file for a TRO. Maybe she needs assistance with pursuing a divorce. Maybe she needs a volunteer attorney to help her. So what we see when people come through our door, there are many, many different issues that they might present with, and if we aren't thoughtful and intentional in the way we assess their needs, then they're not gonna get those services. They're gonna end up racing around to going to different office, shuttled around, and possibly not get all of the services that they might need. And some of these are life-saving. There's SNAP, it's food on the table, it's temporary assistance for folks who are struggling economically to be self-sufficient. It's childcare so that mom can go to work and earn a living wage so that that she knows that her child is protected and safe while she's at work. So we have a lot of different ways that we're trying to embed Ohana Nui. One of the examples is our Family Assessment Center, where we offer wraparound services for families who are suffering from homelessness. That means that we provide home visiting services once they're actually placed in permanent and supportive housing, and it's really following those families to ensure that all of their needs are met, and so they don't fall into homelessness again. That was a mouthful.
That's good.
Sorry,
good. No,
went over my time, I'm sure.
No, you're fine. That's great. You said you've been here a little over a year, starting in October 2017.
Correct.
What do you think has been sort of the biggest surprise for you during that time that maybe you didn't see before you took this position, particularly about the work that DHS is doing?
That's a really good question. What I've seen is that people are truly thoughtful. This job is a labor of love for them. they might not necessarily always know the best way to employ these new methods that we're trying to really kind of test out in a pilot. But people stay at Human Services because they care about helping families. And we're really trying to figure out the best ways to do that. I was at the Commission on the Status of Women for 7 years prior, and that's an administratively attached agency to the department. And I would hear oftentimes complaints from community, complaints about how they were treated by the department, et cetera. And what I've really seen is how hard people are really striving to reform and transform the way that we provide services. And it's I wouldn't stay if that wasn't happening.
You opened your comments talking about, to paraphrase, the silos that exist sometimes within government. Of course, those also exist in a number of other fields outside of government, like healthcare. Talk to us about the sort of operational and organizational approach to try to break down some of those silos, not just maybe within DHS, but also within the different agencies that touch the health and wellness of the community.
Well, we work really closely with Department of Health. We have a lot of cross-agency partnerships, not just among state departments and divisions, but also with our private partners. We've been working really hard on building out our enterprise system, which is a total overhaul of our IT. And it might not sound super exciting to those of you in the private sector who have not been on Lotus Notes for the last 2 decades, but we're really trying to kind of move this through quickly and seamlessly, but with that intention that I talk about, where we know it's going to have an impact on staff, it's going to have a real-time effect on the way they do their work, the way they have to be retrained to do their work. So we're really trying to build out our tech to support them. We know that when we have better data and better tech, we have better policy, we have better healthcare policy, and we are able to reach more people. So we're trying to do that across our 4 divisions and 3 attached agencies and 2 attached commissions.
Yeah. How would you characterize the challenge of meeting the need, of slaking the thirst for data and information by the legislature? I mean, specifically, one of the things that people don't often have a window into is how much of the workload there is from legislators who have questions about very specific details about this program or that, or this budget or that. Give us a window into what that is like to meet the information needs of the legislature.
We actually have a lot of data. We have a lot of research at our fingertips in the department, and we try to keep up to date. We provide an annual report with all of our numbers and our statistics. We're really able to do a deep dive into the data to come up with trends and just to look at how we can best respond to the legislature when they have questions about, it's a bureaucracy, it's a state government agency, so there's a lot of that. There's having to go through the different levels in order to really pull the data up. I tell everybody in our director's office, we don't have access to case data, so a lot of our day is spent responding to folks. We don't necessarily have that case information at our fingertips. So there's a process, and there's built-in kind of safeguards to ensure that confidential data is not out there. So it takes a lot to be able to respond to the legislature, but we try to do so in a responsive manner because we understand that the legislature has their kuleana to make laws that are implementable and feasible, so we try our best to have good communication processes.
Yeah, and as you also talk about Ohana Nui, and obviously spent a lot of time in that on that topic. When we are talking about Ohana Nui in 5 years, what will we be saying? What will we be talking about 5 years from now in terms of really continuing to make meaningful changes? What will some of the highlights be, you hope, when we talk about this in 5 years' time?
It's funny, I have a colleague in my office who talks about it should be like so easy, it's like walking into an Apple store for the self-help desk where they're like, here's all the different things that you can have here. Now, joking aside, I do think that at some point it's gonna be like a one-stop shop, no wrong door. We're really trying to be user-friendly and easy to use so that folks are not kind of shunted around to other agencies that may or may not be able to help them. So I would really like to see it statewide across all state divisions and departments. That kind of partnership really has to be built based on relationships. So what we've been doing is we've been working really closely with Department of Health and Department of Education to really see that we're not duplicating services and see ways that we can leverage federal funds and really assist our families in the best way.
So this audience of folks is pretty diverse. Some of them are in government, some of them are out, private, public sectors. How can this audience sort of engage and put wind in the sails of that sort of statewide multi-silo expansion, recognizing that this is a diverse audience, but I think people generally want to see people get access to the services most easily, most efficiently. How can this community help you at the Department of Human Services get there?
Come to us with suggestions. We always have folks come to us and say, you know, I think this could be done in a different way. This could be done in an easier way. Here's our suggestion. And we take those to heart. You know, we don't take them lightly, and we really look at ways we can implement changes for ease of process. So we're in this with you. We can't do this alone. I don't know how many times I can mention we're a state bureaucracy, so things do move slowly, but I'm hopeful that within the next 4 years, we're really able to lay that groundwork and foundation to see that it's easy for people to access our services and that they're not left kind of on their own to navigate a crazy, complex system.
Yeah. So what would you say then are the biggest challenges that you're trying to navigate to get to that vision in 5 years? You mentioned sort of internal culture, which is a thing, the attempts to unify or better coordinate different silos within the system, within the government system as a thing. The need for ideas is a thing. What is the sort of biggest challenge between our current place and that sort of future goal?
You know, we go through so many different transitions in government, right? So I've been there for a year. Pankaj Banot, our director, has been there in different capacities for almost 20 years. When there's leadership turnover, ideas get lost. Sometimes historical context is lost. Sometimes new programs are not the priority anymore. So one of the things that we have been doing is implementing our first strategic plan and our first financial plan, and that's just really a deep dive into process, goals, where do we want to be in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and so on and so forth. And that's been actually a huge undertaking because it's kind of taking inventory of a really, really large state department and looking at, you know, we have a lot of civil service employees who have so much knowledge and historical context that if we were to be able to tap into all of that knowledge, we could really use that to propel us forward into the future. So strategic plan is one of them. I mentioned the IT overhaul so that all of our divisions can speak to each other. That's not happening right now because our tech system is outdated.
It looks like the House is going to take a slightly unique or modified approach to budgeting this year. They'll be pulling out different programs and trying to apply a zero-based budgeting methodology to many of those programs and then put it back together in an overall strategy. How does that influence trying to implement an agency strategic plan that might be 3 or 5 years when at least in the House approach to legislating or budgeting, might take a zero-based annual approach? You want to wade into legislative politics?
That's a hardball, not a softball. It's difficult. It's difficult to run this very large department when we're talking about a very basic minimum kind of stasis of finances. So I think what we're going to have to do is request for a lot of our additional requests, we're going to have to come up with asks that way. It's not using the historically used way of budgeting our department. So it is difficult, but I think that we can, it's not insurmountable. We know our department very well. We know our needs very well. I think the only difficult problem that's presented is we are so heavily federal funded. We have a lot of 50 match, state and federal, and so it's really navigating kind of how we are funded, which is pretty complex, and each department, each human services ID number in the budget is different in how it's funded. So it's going to take a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the interesting stories of the opening of days of the legislative session, right? Is this, where is the House going in terms of its approach to budgeting, and what does that look like? Does that make every program director and not just agency director, but program director their own, do they have to become their own sort of legislative advocate? Or is this all going to run, through the standard legislative approach, even though the House side is becoming different? Does this mean that the agency needs more leadership out of the governor's office? What does this look like through this legislative session?
Well, I think everybody should be their own expert in their data and their numbers and their information and their stats. That's really the only way you can present a fair, objective view of your financial outlook. So Pankaj and I take a lot of time to pour through the budget. I mean, this starts after the session ends.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time intentionally planning our legislative policies for the next year and looking at budget. We rate our budget depending on the requests. So each one is scaled as a priority. So I think folks should be prepared to really be the subject matter experts of their own budget.
Yeah.
It's hard when we have so many budget requests through just our department alone. It's a lot.
You're going to be followed by Lieutenant Governor Josh Green here in a minute. He was the chair of the Senate Human Services Committee. What kind of chair was he?
Oh, he's awesome.
It's such
He's
a,
awesome.
You wanted a softball,
Yeah.
right? Oh, he's great.
Progressive, he's optimistic, he's got vision.
Really smart.
Really smart.
Yeah.
We're good friends, and
Yeah.
I support his vision as Lieutenant Governor. I'm glad he's where he is.
What? I'm not going to repeat that. Advice or counsel to this group of leaders about how they navigate the future of healthcare and health policy in 2019. What advice would you give them?
We have to work together. There's such a huge shift between private sector and government that sometimes the nuances get lost unless you have really good, solid foundational relationships to learn from each other. Obviously I've been in private sector, but it was not, well, actually I was private sector healthcare long time ago. Yes.
Okay, good.
With Hawaii Pacific Health. This was about 18 years ago, but anyways, the systems are different and we have to learn how to work those systems together. So I think working closely with each other and having good, solid relationships helps us move forward together.
Awesome. Cathy Betts, Deputy Director of the Department of Human Services. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank
for being
you.
here, Cathy. Thank you. I'm sorry about your torn calf muscle.
Yeah, I would definitely am not going to jump on the couch and pull a Tom Cruise because I do have a torn calf muscle.
I'll take your mic. Thank you very much. Super excited to have former Senate Human Service Committee Chairman and current Lieutenant Governor Josh Green here to close out our day. Let's give Lieutenant Governor Green a warm welcome to the stage. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you.
Great to see you all.
I want to give you the full stage to run through, and then we'll come up and bother you in a second with all the tough questions.
Love it. Well, I'd like to take this moment among loving friends to announce I'm running for president of the, sorry, this is Tulsi's speech. My fault. How'd she get on there? Welcome to Hawaii. Welcome to Oahu. Welcome to the afternoon. We're going to spend a half hour or 45 minutes together, and probably it's going to be a blitzkrieg, but we've all talked about some of these issues before. It's a mini change from last year because I have a different role. Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's exciting. It's exciting to see Cathy, who is awesome, and to see all these people that we've worked together with over the last several years. People are getting it. They're getting how the system is fused and how healthcare meets human services and meets the challenges of the world. So, let's dive in. E komo mai. And we come to healthcare in different weird ways. I accidentally got involved in the legislature because I was a doctor and people were suffering. I wanted to make a point. And now I'm the freaking lieutenant governor. So I'm sorry about that, but that means we're going to have a lot of clinical perspective in this lieutenant governor's office. And these weird roads, we all traveled them, whether it was through missionary medicine, even though I'm an agnostic Jew, or it was through community health services, or we're community workers, or we're executives, or we're inventors. It's amazing to see a room of people from different areas come together because everything is connected, and that's my theme today. We're going to talk about healthcare reform in Hawaii. Healthcare reform is treating people in the ER. It's getting together with people on the street, like that lower left corner. That gentleman named Stephen was a banker, had a master's degree, fell apart, had addiction, and became homeless. And he had no access to healthcare unless we created some visionary program that Cathy and Pankaj could come up with, and work the Medicaid process, and Curtis figuring out ways to get people care, figuring out ways that Judy did to get a waiver, an 1115 waiver passed, so he can get wraparound services, so he can get into housing and get health care and not pay $82,000 a year for health care on the street. That's Stephen, that's health care, and he's homeless. So first thing up, because I want to talk about everything possible in this short time that we've got together. Healthcare in Hawaii is combating the opioid crisis, and we've had great work. Eddie, where's Eddie? Let's give him a round of applause if he's still here, because work has been great. People hurt. We have a culture that wants to get fixed real fast, and they go to the doctor's office, and we've got 7 minutes, and we fill out a prescription, and then 4 months later, they have an opioid problem. And then we come in with policy changes, and you can't get opioids, even though you might need them, and my God, you turn to heroin, and you shoot up, and you're addicted. That is real. That happens all the time. It happens to executives, and it happens to people that are having trouble. It happens to people who are addicts and who weren't addicts. But then they struggle with everything in their lives. Their marriages fall apart. They lose their children. They lose their jobs. So combating the opioid crisis has got to be a priority. And these are just some of the basic numbers. We'll share this with everyone, but it's just a reminder, basically, that it's a huge problem. It's a bigger problem than we even know, because so many people take drugs and don't want to talk about it. Half of all the pills that we prescribe in the state, 50%, end up in someone else's hands than those who prescribe them. Pretty big problem. My notes are too far away for me to read, so I'm going to riff a lot here. But my point is, people are going to overdose on opioids, and we have to expand our capacity, not decrease our capacity to get people into treatment. We're going to talk a little bit about that, and I know people did in some of the breakout sessions. Treatment today is the kind of thing I'd like to see. So when we see opioids, we see incredible moments go to tragic moments. So what's this a picture of? What do you do when you're at the graduation in Hilo, and you're giving the talk, and you're celebrating the moment, and everyone is hugging each other, and they're kissing each other, and then a 40-year-old mom who went back to school comes and whispers in your ear, my 20-year-old overdosed on heroin and died last week because they were on opioids and then they took heroin, had never been an addict before, and they lost their dreams to heroin. What do you do in society when that happens? It tells me that the healthcare problems and the situation is so much bigger. We were already trying to solve that problem by getting that mom a college degree in midlife so she could take care of her child, and we were like a week too late. Incredible. So we got to focus on education. We got to focus on having treatment in Hilo. We got to focus on making sure every person can get methadone if they need it, or Suboxone, or what have you. These are the kind of things I think we have to focus on because we're worried. This is healthcare reform in real action. Streamlining and making seamless a PDMP. How many of you guys use the PDMP? Anybody in this room? Does anyone like it? Miskovich likes everything back there, okay? He'll try anything and make it work. But a lot of docs want to make it work faster so we can do a little bit better on opioids, and we can do a little bit better in the community so we don't have the risk of extra addiction. We have to have Suboxone readily available without prior authorization, I think. These are ideas that get bounced around, and sometimes we say we don't have prior authorization, and then somehow or other there's prior authorization. And I think there are some parts of the healthcare system where we just have to accept it's going to be a little bit more complicated and expensive, but we should do it no matter what. So I think things like Suboxone being available, naloxone availability for overdoses, already a priority last year, and great work to the legislature, the health chairs who did that, and they did a great job. And then greatly enhance our access to detox. I think there should be detox in every region. HHSC, we've worked with them. We talked to people who are already doing detox. They need more beds. There's got to be ways to get this care to people, because in my experience, as many as 10% of our population's got some serious problem with drugs at some point during the year. And a lot of people want to get off, but they're afraid. They're really afraid to do it. So detox everywhere. Another health policy question. It's medicinal marijuana. Now, I'm not a big player in this field. I have a lot to learn, but just maybe the CBD question will help us. Alternative to prescription for opioids. It's coming. It's coming for the states everywhere. And the question really is going to be, does this lead us down a road that we want to go down? But if it's less pain pills, maybe it's the way to go. Another question to consider, does using medicinal marijuana actually decrease pain and decrease our prescription of opioids? Maybe that's part of the answer, but not if it makes more kids susceptible to addiction, in my mind. Real serious policy questions that I'm so glad to be with State of Reform today, because these are the kind of guys that go out and seek the answers. They go to you guys, you have a panel, they discover what's being done in this region, in Austin, in Seattle, and all across the country. We just might get to the answer. They bring together the best people, you among them, so I'm kind of excited to see this growing. But that's another question for me, medicinal marijuana and how it's going to impact the opioid crisis. Then we go to our physician shortage. Another issue that the Gov would like me to take a look at. We've been talking about it for a while, but the numbers these charts look the same every year, right? Might be that I used the same chart from last year, so that would make it look very similar. But point is, we still have 600 or 800 docs short, and we never have enough nurse practitioners, physician assistants. We haven't yet had a huge surge of community care workers that we know will help pay for a lot of the care because they deliver great care in the community. That's got to be the answer. And so we're talking about some solutions right now. These are the numbers that we've seen historically, but how do you get over it? I was talking to a major bank in the state of Hawaii that is willing to do comprehensive loans for any of us at extremely low interest rates if the state will back it. Maybe we'll do that. There should be investment in healthcare providers. There should be no debt whatsoever if you commit to 2 years of national service in your region, in my opinion. These are the kind of attempts that, if we do that, we can then actually expand our residency programs, expand our medical schools, which is difficult. We have to enhance reimbursements for primary care. These are realities that we all know it, including the insurance companies, but how do we pay for that? And then we come to the big question in my mind. How do you deal with those larger social questions, the questions that exist as super health questions? How do you deal with homelessness? It's been said a few times in this setting and in others, and it's just an opinion, but I believe it's correct, that housing is healthcare. Initiatives and solutions that solve our housing crisis are going to be health initiatives in our book in the coming days. These are the numbers that we've looked at before. The high price of homelessness in our state, it's the same in every other state. Tiny percentage of our people on Medicaid, because they're suffering, because they're having big challenges with chronic disease, consume a very large percentage of our Medicaid spend. So when you talk to Cathy, when you talk to Pankaj, and you see 3.6 or maybe 4% of our Medicaid population, remember there's 362,000 people in the state of Hawaii on Medicaid. That's a fourth of our population, 1 out of 4 on Medicaid. But just 13,000 of those individuals consume most of the money, $1.2 billion. We have to say, are we taking care of enough people? Are we delivering enough care? Can we do better there so that we can provide more care in the setting of addiction? Can we provide more care in the setting of housing? How do we do that, and how do we structure our programs? Because right now, if a person is homeless and is in a conflict, the police are called or the medics are called, it's $1,050 by ambulance to the hospital, $1,600 in the ER, another $2,000 in holding. Before you know it, the median is going to be $4,450 spent. That's 2 months of housing first. 2 months with full wraparound services, full housing for an individual that, like this gentleman, who would go to the hospital over and over and over again. And when you look at what his year looks like, it's 80 plus grand per year for basic care that he needed, and he still didn't get housed. That was Gary. Gary, in 2017, as I've talked about to a few of you, went to the hospital 241 times. 241 times. Wonderful guy. Edgy. Hairy. Look at that guy. Hairier than me. It's scary. And sweet. A little mental illness. Not bad. No addiction. Little COPD. Wanted me to tell his story. He spent $1.229 million in 1 year. 1 year of Medicaid dollars. And then he died of a stroke in 2018, was in the ICU for 6 weeks before he died. So Gary spent $1.229 million. We just opened that hygiene center. Fantastic move by the mayor, by Councilman Manahan, by the whole council, getting people on the same page. Greg is running this thing. It's going to be fantastic. Their budget is $1 million a year. $1 million. And this guy spent $1.229 million because we didn't have a solution for him. We didn't figure out a way. And he still got wonderful care where he was. But we couldn't break that cycle in time for Gary. And so we have to look at new solutions. We have to figure out how to help him, because if you don't, look at the complications of homelessness. Everything else gets worse. It's incredibly stressful, so you have to self-medicate. I mean, there's no way around it. If you're not self-medicating when you're living on the street, I don't know what superhuman fiber you're made of. Then you have cleanliness challenges and MRSA infections and heightened risk for injuries. And the average lifespan, as Dr. Miskovich pointed out to me when we first started talking about this, is 30 years less. You live only an average of 51 years if you're on the street. But in all those years, the years that aren't supposed to be expensive, you're spending an average of $80,000+ per year in healthcare because you're suffering so greatly. We put a roof over someone's head, the costs drop over 40%, over 50% in Seattle. Our Department of Health looked at it and they think it might be 70%, 73% decrease in cost. So we can dramatically improve people's care if we look at housing as healthcare. And I think that's got to be part of our solution because it builds into other things. It builds into housing first. When you save that money, then we have the budget for the mayors all across the state. We have the governor that can then afford to build housing quickly. We have the capacity to actually change the trajectory of these health problems all across our state. We have solutions that we have to bring to bear because have you been to Pu'uhonua Waianae yet? Go there. Go there and take a basket of food. Go see the individuals. 300 individuals actually living houseless in Waianae, suffering. When I was there, a little boy came running out from a dog shed, sinus infection, diaper down to his knees, like a good little boy running around anywhere, but also had a big scratch across his chest that was infected. And he was living in dirt. And if it's not dealt with soon, he'll never get an education. He'll never be able to rise up in society. It's impossible. So we have to find shelter for them. We have to provide health care for them. And attempts have to be made very quickly to achieve land and to achieve housing. Because if we don't do that, we can't look ourselves in the mirror. And that health care problem in that small area could explode. It can become a cholera epidemic. It can become an economic crisis. It can become a drain on all the healthcare resources in a region when we're already short. So that's why we have to use things like the Ohana zones that you've heard about. Using money for infrastructure and services might as well be healthcare. But I'll tell you, it's going to be more rewarding than most of the healthcare dollars we spend. We've talked about this HUI that we've put together. Many of you have been so extraordinary to hear us out. We call it H4. It's the Hawaii Healthcare HUI to treat homelessness as a part of our social determinant of health. That's really what we're talking about. It's a private-public partnership in its truest sense. It's been supported by many of you. We're hopeful that it will launch this year. They've already started the first H, which is hygiene, then acute health care, then medical respite, and then housing at the top level. And when you do that, the Garys of the world drop their costs to $10,000, $12,000 a year instead of $1.2 million. That's a 100-fold decrease. They get services right away. We don't quibble over cost. That's how it looks. Hygiene, healthcare, housing, that's medical respite, and then humanitarian is our fourth floor because so many good people are putting millions of dollars into this. But while they put millions of dollars into this, they save tens of millions of dollars, which any one of us in our program could then benefit from. These are our objectives. Make it safe, make it functional. Alleviate financial strain on the medical system, but really alleviate crisis. This will be the services that we offer. And you're already seeing some of them come to bear. That's what it looks like. So congratulations to those guys. It's special. This will mean fewer infections. This will mean people can get mental health care. This will mean people can be found when they're struggling. Punawai Rest Stop is what we're calling the first floor. We prescribe housing. Do any of you guys watch that show, New Amsterdam? So it's like, ultra-liberal stuff like me, right? And so the promo on the show is the guy talking to one of his administrators saying, this guy just spent $1 million on healthcare in our ER last year. I'm prescribing you a house. Everyone was laughing at me 2 years ago when we talked about that. We're going to do that. We're going to do it in a creative way. We're going to do it right. We're going to do it by vetting through Medicaid services and Department of Human Services. There's 525,000 people in our country that are homeless. Billions and billions of dollars are spent into our healthcare system. We don't help people, but if we can prescribe a house with whatever mechanism you want to use, whatever words you want to use, we're going to follow through and help a lot of people. And Americans are going to be happy about it because the cities won't be under siege with this problem. People won't be suffering on the streets like we've seen in other countries only. And frankly, it's kind of straightforward. God help us in government. But that's the kind of thing I hope that we see, and that's the kind of creativity that we're already seeing. This is a variant of that. Make no mistake. The work that Judy Moore Peterson does is visionary, and to get an 1115 waiver to provide services through Medicaid will help save on so many of those services that those very agencies couldn't afford before. They will be housing people with their private equity, their philanthropy, and their other grants because she has made it possible now to do wraparound services. I can't believe they approved the waiver. I can't believe it. Congratulations. It's amazing. She deserves a round of applause. So as we come to the close of this, this is the place that we'll go next. People will be innovative. There will be grants. Who knows how they'll play out? But just maybe we'll manage social determinants of health like housing and food and heating or air conditioning in the hot zones where people have CHF and can't deal with it and go to the hospital. And maybe we'll do that with some housing resources. Maybe that will be the answer. But we have to get more creative. We have to bring people like you guys together, because when you break out of here and you look at your program and say, maybe there's a way that we can more creatively do something with an unusual partner, whether it's DHS or someone just down the street or that runs a housing agency, even though if you're a nursing agency, I tell you, you're going to be winners in your community. So the road to recovery, my vision is treatment today. If someone's got addiction, we get them treatment today. That's where we've got to go. See this car? I walked by a car like this day in and day out in a campaign in 2004. Two guys living in a car packed like this. Talk to them. Eventually they confided in me that they were meth addicts. And extraordinary people. Both had a job. They would go in and out of their addiction, and then years would pass. I'd see them again living in this car. I couldn't believe that they survived. We started a health center, finally, with your support. That health center got one of them into treatment. I get a call on election day 6 years ago. One guy says, hey, this is Jack, not his name. He says, I wanted to tell you I got married. I'm making 6 figures. I'm clean. Went to the health center. I got housed. I gave the truck to charity, actually. Joe overdosed last week. One of them made it. One of them died. But someday both of them will make it because of the work that you're doing. So think about that. We have to have access to care for all drug treatment. It saves lives. These are all of our healthcare problems. Sometimes it's going to be housing those two gentlemen. And as I come down the rest of it, we go to treatment today, we improve everyone's lives. We don't see our relatives have broken hearts. We don't see people get addicted for decades. The drug treatment has to be covered as primary care in my mind, and that's where we're going to head. Here's a slide about disparities. I kind of shrunk it down because we go on for 6 hours. And this isn't even my big slide. This is the big slide. That's what healthcare should look like someday in the future. Universal access to healthcare, behavioral health first. 2-year public service to repay all of our debt, no matter what we serve in. Fuse Medicare and Medicaid if you really want to do it. Get to a place where you can do buy-in of Medicare at age 50. You're going to have to do it a little slow, otherwise everyone's going to freak out. But that probably is your road. Reform Big Pharma. Costs too much. They say by the year 2030, a full 1% of our population will spend over $100,000 a year on their medications. $100,000 a year on their medications. It's crazy. Reform tobacco. Raise the tobacco tax. $2 a pack more. Pay for the things we believe in. Establish national health priorities from rooms like this. That's how we're going to get there. Can't say thank you enough. Thank you for encouraging me for all these years.